So moving on in the Kalicube Summit, I'm here with Dixon Jones. I've known you for years. Lovely guy, super smart. We're going to be talking about the Entity Home website. Welcome, Dixon.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for your time. Thanks for letting me be in on the summit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've earned your place. Entities we're going to be talking about, and in particular the Entity Home. You spent years as the public face of Majestic, and now you're InLinks, which is all to do with entities.
Yeah.
And you built it before AI overviews, ChatGPT, and the rest of it. So you'd seen this coming.
Yeah.
What did you think, or do we think the move from strings to things was that convinced you to do this, to move from the Majestic focus to InLinks?
So the thing that made me, I was starting to talk about entities well before my move from Majestic, and I was still with my Majestic hat on. I remember sitting in PubCons, which is sort of a conference in the States, when they're still going, but they're smaller than they were. And I had, really, people I've always respected in the audience, as I was sitting there talking about this purchase by Google of Metaweb and Freebase. And of course, you kind of switched onto it at the same sort of time, but they bought this database thing that none of us as SEOs, it didn't feed into our psyche of keyword research and rankings for keywords and stuff like that. This whole entity, this whole database idea was completely alien to us, and some of us were all trying to jump around and figure it all out. And I started to pull out things. I know you did. You started to see KGID and URLs and start thinking what's happening here and stuff. So I then started reimagining how I'd learn SEO and started thinking about, okay, now I understand you're talking about topics. I can entities in my head now being a topic,
Right.
For the benefit of this conversation, and started thinking, oh, you know what? If you organize the world's information by topics, so you think about an encyclopedia, a dictionary, you just have a dictionary of concepts and words and ideas. That's a lot less data for a machine to analyze than you've got all of the pages on the internet that mentions the same ideas billions of times. And then you've got to process things that way. That's all very disparate, the information. Whereas if you organize the information, and I could imagine that there were huge savings at scale for a large organization like Google to think about things in this kind of way. So then I started the way I started to work that out and start talking about it, I had to write it down. So I wrote Entity SEO, and I wrote a book. I won't say it's the best book of all time, but it was me getting my thoughts out. And still to this day, if you don't know anything about, thinking in terms of entities, it's a good 70 page free PDF read now. It's free these days. Or you can get it on Amazon in printed form if you want, and pay some money and give me some cash. But yeah, so I've really been thinking about it since 2014. And I would say that, at some point along that journey, I met my business partner now at InLinks, and basically been thinking about the same sort of thing, but he's a programmer, and when you get a programmer and a marketing guy,
the perfect combination,
then it works. Yeah, it works well. So we launched InLinks and then moved on from there, which is really just thinking about content and turning it into knowledge graphs. That's kind of what it does at its core.
Right. Okay. So you've gone from strings to things as well in your SEO journey.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Which is brilliant. And so at InLinks, you focus much more on topics, whereas at Kalicube, we focus on the entity itself, the brand. And we were just saying before the call, you're coming from the top down and we're coming from the bottom up. I'm really interested in topics as an entity. Give me some more insights on that.
So the way I see it is that for me, you have to have a definition of, I like to have a definition of an entity that's beyond my control. So I like to use Wikipedia or Wikidata, but you could use the Encyclopedia Britannica. It could be anything else, as long as I can't edit it, as to what counts as an entity. Now, you work with me when Dixon Jones wrote Entity SEO. I needed your help to try and get, recognized by Google's knowledge graph, because I have no way of telling Google I'm an entity. I needed your expertise to go that way of trying to get Dixon in the knowledge panel, which was my objective at the time, really. And I knew my way of doing it was to get a Wikipedia page, but I can't get a Wikipedia page. That would have been my way of doing it, but I can't do that. So we needed to sort of think about other things. But so for me, then it's all about whatever brand you've got, whether it's yourself as a person, your company, or whatever. It's not about trying to make yourself an entity. That becomes I think that's your kind of thing. Is making the brand an entity in its own right in the knowledge graph, so that Google can then work around it and stuff. My thing is you've got the world. Let's say you're a barber shop in London, you're a Turkish barber in London. Then you've got these concepts. You've got the Strand or the Oxford Street, and you've got hair cutting, and you've got hairdressing and Turkey, and these concepts. These concepts are all things that are in Wikipedia, or choose any other RDF, any database that's structured over here. So Wikipedia. These concepts are well defined, and frankly, a Turkish barber in London is unlikely to be semantically close to Genesis and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, for example. Or choose song here. So in other words, you make your brand consistently talk about the same entities, the topics in Wikipedia in my head, and so you're consistent about that. It reduces the ability for a machine to get it wrong. And it also forces you as a brand to make sure you keep on iterating the same message out there that has got to have been thought through, and you don't start talking about, Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin,
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. So the coming away from topics. So you're just saying that as a brand, I need to surround myself with the right topics so that the machines understand what it is I do, where I'm
absolutely. Yes, that's my thing. Yeah.
For them to understand who I am, I need to have an entity home. People often don't understand what the entity home is. Can you give me your version? Because I know you've got a good vision of this.
Well, I think that the entity home, of course, for your brand is most likely to be the homepage of your website or the about page of your website. It could be either, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a LinkedIn page. It could be any other location. The great thing about a page on your own website is you have complete control over it. But once you've decided where that home is, I think the magic, and I'm sure you would agree, is to make sure that, because I got this from you anyway, that the magic is to make sure that everything else agrees with that definition of homepage. So you want to make sure that you've got a homepage that you can control, or a location that you can control, usually one URL. But I think where we then differ, I mean, we don't differ in our approaches, is that I'm then thinking, right, my business is a barber in London. I now need to make London a physical feature of my business. I need a landing page for London as well, so that the AI or the search engines or whatever can understand the reference between my barbers in London and my authority in London. And it's a bad example because obviously I've chosen a regional thing, but I think these ideas of saying, choosing something a little less, let's choose a.
Well, I mean, sorry, you're saying this is me on my about page. Here's a page about London. Here's a page about barbers. Here's a page about hairdressing. All of this is me, and this is what represents me.
And also what I'm saying is that your homepage is saying, look, I'm an expert in these things, and then those other pages have to prove it. Those other sections of your brand presence have to prove it. You need to give authority to the things that you say you're an authority in. Otherwise, there is no circular sort of message that says, yeah, Dixon is an authority at this, or or Jason is an authority at this. You need to prove it, and that's done by adding information into the system so that they can see, yes, we know that that's not the only page on the internet that talks about entities or internal links or
Yeah.
whatever it may be, but it's a good page and it's good content and it's a good hub of pages. We can come onto that bit a little bit as well. But ultimately they feed the narrative that you're giving from your homepage, so that there is a two-way belief system going on in the machines.
Right. And I mean, you just mentioned the idea of hubs.
Yeah.
The entity home website split, we were talking about it earlier on. You say, Jason, you keep talking about the about page because that's the brand. But then there are lots of hub pages, which is what you're talking about. The ones that give more perspective on the brand. Go, tell me more.
Yes, yeah. So I think that once you've decided who you are, which for a lot of businesses is much harder than they think, once you've decided, and I'm going to move away from a regional sort of business. So let's say you're a travel company that has expertise in cruise ships, in river cruises and adventure holidays. Then you've got obviously your brand, your cruise and holidays Inc. or whatever, but then you've got to, having said that you're experts in river cruises and mountain bike adventures, you've got to then prove it. So you've then got to have a hub that is distinct from the main brand, that's about mountain bikes and adventures on mountain bikes, and then give good content that shows that you have something more than just selling the product. Of course, you may well want the page that pillar page to be your sales checkout for biking, mountain bikes, but you need to have all this extra content that shows, that mountain bike journey up Snowdonia in Wales is a very different experience to that one up the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, but you want to talk about those things, and then they all feed in to showing that the expertise around mountain biking is there with all this other content underneath, which isn't selling directly, but it is reinforcing, because it can link into the if you'd like to book your own kind of, here's the one here, or so you can then send all that content back to that destination topic of mountain biking or river cruises.
Right. So identify who you are, identify what it is you do and who you serve, push that information out, and then make sure that everything on the web corroborates, and then presumably use links and sameAs. Tell me more about that. The sameAs.
So links and sameAs. So what we advocate, and I'm not saying it's the only way to do this, but your about page or your homepage, depending which way you have, that says who you are, and says it may well say that you're experts in this, and this, but then you have a section about mountain pages, and what you can do is say, on your homepage, you can say we're experts in mountain biking, and it can link to, you can say, which is the same as this Wikipedia article over here, or you could choose a different data source, but it's the same as this is the definition of what we're calling mountain biking. Something over here, some third-party thing over here. So the same as is, we think we're good at mountain biking. You could call it hiking, you could call it, puncture repair kits, and then we can still link to the mountain biking URL over here in the same as schema. And that gives a common point of reference, because now you can then go to the page that's your pillar page for mountain biking, say this page is about a thing called mountain biking, which is this page over here, which, it's the same definition as we use elsewhere on the site. And then you can start to write loads and loads of content. And then the other pages that support that, for example, I had a trip in the Atlas Mountains on a mountain bike, can link through to the mountain bike page. And that can be about the Atlas Mountains, but then that's the Atlas Mountains in the context of mountain biking. So it's acting as a sub topic of mountain biking. It's bringing in the concept of the Atlas Mountains, but only in the context of mountain biking. You're not talking about being an expert in the Atlas Mountains. You're just feeding that part into improving your expertise around mountain biking, which in turn shows one of your expertise or one of your pillars for your business, which gets back to your brand, which defines your brand.
Brilliant. Oh, defines your brand. I like that. You also said the word Atlas, and that brings me on to Apple, the fruit, the company. Jaguar the cat, and Google talk about dominant interpretation,
Yep.
minor interpretation, common interpretation. And
Yep.
I find this super interesting is how do you disambiguate between Apple the company, Apple
Yeah.
the fruit,
Yeah.
and Atlas the mountain, Atlas the thing, the book I have.
And this is yes, go on.
God, I'm just
This
kind of thinking, we immediately think of
starting me
that, and
off.
then we
Yeah,
think,
yeah. So,
we've had so many companies call themselves what they do, which was
yeah,
great for SEO, and all of a
yeah.
sudden it isn't so good because it's confusing. How do you solve that
Terrible.
problem?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the way that I mean, the good thing about sameAs schema is that you can do that. So Apple the company and Apple the fruit, they both have Wikipedia pages. So there is a Wikipedia page for Apple. There is the fruit, and there's a page for Apple the company, and also probably Apple Studios the record label as well. So they probably all have their own Wikipedia page, or will all have their own page, so to speak. But in this case, Wikipedia works out very nicely. So you can then in the schema define that. You can say this goes to this Wikipedia page, and this is about this Wikipedia. So it does that differentiation in the schema. After that, because of course not everybody uses schema, and you don't have to use schema to do all this, but the way that the machines will look at it is really how you talk about it. If you're on this Apple page, you're talking about iPhones and Macs, of course it's going to be Apple the company. If you're talking about strawberries and growing seasons, that's going to be Apple the fruit. And so even if you don't use schema, the words you use on the page will act as that proxy for understanding that concept. And it becomes mathematically very clear for a machine to see that Apple the company, or people talking about Apple the company, are very, very different to the Apple the fruit. It's not so easy with something like horsepower, interestingly, because horsepower is something you can use with a horse. You can use it in a car, but then you try and do it with a Mustang, and a Mustang is also kind of horse. So so you can start getting it can get confusing. But just a few more words on the page, and the machines tend to work it out anyway. The great thing about schema is you're trying to give it clarity, but we don't have any proof that they're using that at every level of the system. But what it is doing is it's forcing us as humans to think about these words and things that we're using on the page as well. And we shouldn't underestimate that. The fact that we've decided this page is about this entity, and this entity forces us to write in that kind of context. So that defines the system. But as soon as you've put something into a number, a point in a database, the maths of showing that Apple the company and Apple the fruit are different becomes much easier for the machines.
Brilliant. A few things leap out at me there. Number one is there are multiple ways of disambiguating. sameAs is one. And everybody having an entity home or a point of reconciliation that John Mueller calls it is helpful to us all, that we identify one single source of truth for everybody and every company and every product. Number two is the context you were talking about. Number three is the categorization, the way you organize your site ontologically. But I also thought, don't make silly jokes about Apple the fruit when you're talking about Apple the company, because that just confuses everybody.
I think that does confuse, and it can confuse humans as well. And we're not all, we're all at different points on the spectrum, and I sit there and look at my social media feed at times, and I got bunches of friends who sit there and comment on stuff, and I can't tell if they're telling a joke or not. I don't know if they're lying or not. And I'm clearly not alone, because there's people with obvious AI things of politicians doing weird things that are clearly faked, and then other things that aren't clearly, but it's happening all over the place. The misinformation that's coming out is not always coming out maliciously. It's often people at a different level on the spectrum just sort of saying what they think is an obvious joke, but somebody over here on the just doesn't get that and just goes and then has an argument about it, thus inflating the inaccuracy in the first place.
And AI isn't very good at humor or poetry. So coming on to your no ID entity path, I think that's a term you use at InLinks, is saying, I don't have a KGMID, the knowledge graph identifier. How do I move from not having one to having one, and what difference does it make to me as a business?
So from not having one to having one, I phone up Jason. Is honestly, but the approach for me is, yes, as you say, have a set page that is your definition of who you are, and we also, and I've definitely learned this from the Jason Barnard school, is make sure on that page that I refer to all of the other places where I describe myself. So on my DixonJones.com homepage, for example, where I identify myself as my own entity, I will refer to my LinkedIn profile, my personal LinkedIn profile, not the WayK one or the InLinks one, but my personal LinkedIn profile, my personal Twitter profile, whatever. And then I go and make sure that all of those talk about, go link to my website, and not to any page on my top. The same page that I've done that I've said is where my LinkedIn profile is. So I've linked it up, so it's all the same. And then after that, you do have to go and get other people to corroborate that story.
Yeah.
So in other words, you can't just do that on your own. Well, you can, but it won't get you anywhere. It's only when other people outside your immediate sphere of influence starts talking about it. And they will make mistakes if you haven't got that information correct in the first place, because they'll link through to your Twitter profile, which you don't use. And then you go to that, and then your Twitter profile doesn't talk about your main homepage. And so then the story gets muddy. And for me, I think for Google to decide that this person or this brand is worthy of a token in their own database, a record in their own knowledge graph, they need enough corroborating evidence. So you could argue that's links. You can argue that that's citations in newspapers. You can argue that it's a Wikipedia profile. You can argue all sorts of things. The truth of the matter is that if you're consistent, you will need a lot less of that for Google to have the confidence to say, yes, that is an entity that needs to be defined in its own right. If you've gone and not thought about this a lot, and over the years you've spread multiple different definitions of yourself, then you could find it very, very hard. And I think that I'm sure Red Bull, it's got its own Wikipedia page, no problem getting an entity, but it will be in a case in point where they did their marketing before around, sponsoring jumps out of airplanes and really weird, bizarre things, which were all associated with their idea of adrenaline drink, an adrenaline drink, really, kind of thing. So there was a I could absolutely, as a human being, you could see it, but you could also see how a machine would then say, I don't know if Red Bull is about a drink or whether it's about adventurous sports, or whether it's about, flying or whatever. And it could get confused. So that's a good example of where old style guerrilla marketing might not work in the new age kind of, we need to give a unified message. So I think that I'm not saying that that's done any harm to Red Bull. Anybody that can sponsor a Formula One team is probably doing all right. But the methodology behind it for the rest of us, we don't want to get too broad in what we're talking about. We want to keep it consistent.
Right. No, I really like that. You've explained kind of how to get a KGMID incredibly clearly. I love that. And then you went on to that whole thing of you need topical context, because otherwise you're confusing the machines, and machines are not going to be friendly towards you unless you're Red Bull and already incredibly famous.
Absolutely. So and as you say, the humans effectively as well, because as soon as they see the joke about the fruit or the computer or whatever out of context, then there's going to be for every human that gets it, there's going to be half a human that doesn't. It's a terrible thing to say, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, so of all of those, the things we've talked about, it's a lot. What do you suggest a brand or company does right out of the box after listening to this first for their entity?
Choose three to 5 pages on Wikipedia that describe you without saying you, I would say, and stick to that message. Just so for InLinks, it's internal linking, it's content writing, it's entities, and it's, or whatever. For Jason, it's, I don't know, lived in France, a bunch of things, but whatever your brand is, describe it in 5 Wikipedia pages.
Oh, I like that. That's a beautiful way to end it. Thank you so much, Dixon. That was the perfect piece of advice. Go away, find the 5 Wikipedia pages that describe you without saying your name.
That's it.
Brilliant. Thank you. See you soon. That was delightful.
Cheers.